You're looking for knee pain solutions, and you've definitely come to the right place. We're diving into some really cool mobility techniques, not your typical rest ice compress type stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
This source is all about getting those knees moving better and tackling that root of the problem.
That's right. We're not just slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms here.
No.
This deep dive is going to help you understand like the mechanics behind your knee pain, and you know how these techniques actually work.
Okay, so the first thing this source dives into is the importance of terminal knee extension. Okay, I'm already lost. Can you break that down for me? What is that even?
It's actually simpler than it sounds. Terminal knee extension is basically your ability to fully straighten your knee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like just straightening it all the way out.
Yep.
Gotcha.
It might seem really basic, but it's really crucial for just about every movement that you make.
I guess that makes sense. Why is that so important, though, to be able to fully straighten your knee?
Well, think about it this way. If you can't fully extend your leg, your knee is like constantly under tension, even when you're just standing there. It's like trying to hold a plank, but only being able to get halfway down. You're going to get tired really quickly. And over time, all that strain on your knee, it can lead to pain and even damage.
Okay. So it's like it never really gets to relax.
Exactly. It's always working, always under stress.
Yikes. That doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
So what can you do if you're struggling with that terminal knee extension?
Well, this source suggests something called the knee tweak fix. It might sound a little strange,
Okay.
but it's designed to help realign your knee joint and get you back to that full range of
A
motion.
knee tweak. That sounds slightly intimidating. What does that even involve?
It uses a combination of a special band, it's called a VooDoo Floss Band, and some strategic movements to create space in the joint and help everything slide back into place.
So it's kind of like giving your knee a little reset button.
Exactly. And once you've kind of addressed the knee itself, we can start looking at the surrounding muscles. You've probably heard the phrase, everything's connected. And it's definitely true when it comes to your body.
Right. Okay. So even if the pain is in my knee, the problem could actually be stemming from somewhere else.
Precisely.
Okay.
This source dives deep into techniques that target the areas around your knee,
Okay.
like your calves and hamstrings. One method is called gap and smash, which focuses on the spot where those muscles meet behind your knee.
Why that spot specifically?
Because it's a common area for tightness to build up, especially if you have tight calves. And believe it or not, tight calves can actually contribute to knee pain.
Really? How does that work?
Well, when your calves are tight, it can actually limit your ankle's range of motion.
Oh.
And so this forces your knee to compensate, putting extra stress on the joint and potentially leading to pain.
Okay.
It's kind of like wearing shoes that are too small.
Yeah.
Eventually, your feet are going to start hurting.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yep.
Wow. I never realized how much my calves could be impacting my knees. So gap and smash helps to loosen up those tight spots and kind of restore the proper movement.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And you can use different tools for this technique, like a lacrosse ball or a foam roller, depending on, your preference and the level of pressure you need.
So it's kind of like a deep tissue massage for the back of your knee.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
You're essentially breaking up adhesions and restoring fluidity to the muscles and tissues.
This is really fascinating. I'm starting to understand just how complex knee pain can be. There's so much more to it than just the knee itself.
Absolutely. And speaking of complexity, this source gets into some other interesting techniques like the suprapatellar smash and floss.
Okay, that one sounds a little intense. What is suprapatellar anyway?
It just refers to the area above your kneecap. This technique is specifically designed to address pain that might be caused by activities like jumping or squatting.
So if my knees tend to ache after a workout, this could be a helpful technique to try.
It could be, especially if you notice your knees caving inward when you squat, or if you tend to land with poor form when you jump.
Okay.
These movements can put a lot of stress on the area above your kneecap.
I'm definitely guilty of letting my knees cave in during squats. I need to work on that.
Well, this technique could be a good place to start.
Okay.
It uses a lacrosse ball to help release tension and improve the mechanics of your knee joint.
Okay, let's move on to the next technique because the source really seems to emphasize the importance of calf work,
Yeah,
especially for overall knee health.
you're right. The source has a whole section dedicated to calf mobilization.
Wow.
And it points out that the average person takes around 10,000 steps per day,
Really?
which puts a lot of demand on our calf muscles.
10,000 steps. That's a lot of work for our poor calves.
Yeah.
So what can we do to give them some love?
Well, this source talks about the importance of calf smashing.
Okay.
And no, it's not as aggressive as it sounds.
Calf smashing does sound a bit like we're taking a hammer to our legs. What does that actually entail?
It basically involves using a tool like a foam roller or a barbell to apply pressure to your calf muscles and break up any knots or tightness.
So it's similar to the gap and smash technique, but we're targeting the calves specifically.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
The key is to find the right amount of pressure, enough to feel a release, but not so much that it causes pain. And remember, tight calves can impact your ankles too.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. So calf smashing can actually help to improve ankle mobility as well.
That's right.
Okay.
By releasing the tightness in the calves, you can restore proper ankle range of motion, which in turn can help alleviate stress on your knees.
You okay?
It's all about restoring that balance and optimal movement throughout your lower body.
This is making me realize how much I've neglected my calves. I think it's time to give them some much needed attention.
I think we all could benefit from a little calf love.
Yeah, that's true.
And speaking of neglected areas, this source also points out the limitations of that classic calf stretch we all learned in gym class.
You mean the one where you put your foot up against the wall?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Well, it's a good starting point, but it can be a bit too static, and it doesn't always address the deeper tissues around the ankle joint.
So how can we make that stretch more effective?
This source suggests adding a band for distraction.
Okay.
By looping a resistance band around your foot and pulling it towards you, you create more space in the ankle joint, allowing for a deeper and more beneficial stretch.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's about adding a little extra oomph to that classic stretch.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important area that often gets overlooked, the posterior chain.
You're talking about the glutes and hamstrings, right?
Yeah.
I know those are important for strength and power, but how do they relate to knee pain?
Well, we hear a lot about strengthening the posterior chain, but this source emphasizes the importance of restoring suppleness and mobility in these muscles as well.
So it's not just about building strength, it's about making sure those muscles can move freely and properly.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this is especially important if you spend a lot of time sitting, which can lead to tightness and shortening of the hamstrings.
Oh, yeah.
And as you can imagine, tight hamstrings can pull on your pelvis, which can then affect your knee alignment.
Wow. It's amazing how everything is connected. So what's the best way to address that hamstring tightness?
This source suggests a variety of posterior chain smash and floss techniques.
Okay.
You can use a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, or even a barbell to apply pressure and release tension in the hamstrings.
Wait, so we're smashing and flossing our hamstrings now. These names are getting pretty creative. Tell me, is there a specific way to perform these techniques?
Yes. This source recommends doing most of these hamstring mobilizations on an elevated surface.
Elevated surface?
Yeah.
Like a box? Or
Like a box or a bench.
Okay. Why is that? I usually just do my foam rolling on the floor.
There's a couple of reasons. First, an elevated surface provides better leverage, allowing you to apply more pressure to those stubborn hamstring tissues. And second, it helps to reduce strain on the sciatic nerve, which can be a concern when mobilizing the hamstrings from the floor.
So we want to be safe.
Yeah, safety first.
Okay.
Always.
That makes sense. I always wondered why my hamstrings felt so much tighter when I rolled them out on the floor.
It's all about finding the right position and technique to maximize effectiveness and minimize discomfort. And while we're on the topic of often neglected areas, let's shift our focus to the lower leg muscles along the inside of the shin.
Who knew the inside of your shins could be so important? I don't think I've ever even thought about those muscles.
You'd be surprised how much tightness in these muscles can impact your foot arches and even contribute to knee pain.
Wow.
Yeah, this source explains that by mobilizing the inside of the shin bone, you can actually help restore proper foot position and alleviate pain in the arches.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So working on my shins could actually help my knee pain?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It might sound counterintuitive, but remember, everything's connected.
Yeah.
And these lower lug muscles play a crucial role in supporting the arches of your feet.
Okay, so how do we go about mobilizing those shin muscles?
It's pretty straightforward. You can use a ball to apply pressure along the inside of your shin bone, working from your ankle up towards your knee.
And this is especially relevant for people with certain foot conditions, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
If you have plantar fasciitis, posterior tibialis tendinitis, or even just flat feet, this technique could be incredibly beneficial.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense. We've covered the inside of the shin, but I have a feeling there's more to the shin than we realize. Is there anything else we need to be aware of?
There is. The source also highlights the importance of addressing the front and outside of the shin,
Okay.
especially for runners.
Ah, yes. Runners are always complaining about shin splints.
Yeah.
So what's the connection between this area and knee pain?
Well, the front and outside of your shin houses the peroneal muscles. These muscles are responsible for ankle stability and foot movement. And when they're tight, it can limit your ankle's range of motion, which, as we've discussed, can have a ripple effect all the way up to your knee.
So shin splints aren't just a nuisance. They could actually be a sign of a bigger problem.
They could be.
Okay.
And by addressing tightness in the peroneal muscles, you can not only alleviate those shin splints, but also improve overall lower leg function and potentially reduce stress on your knee.
Okay, so we've talked about smashing our calves and flossing our hamstrings. What's the secret to tackling those pesky peroneal muscles?
This source recommends using a rolling pin or a lacrosse ball to target the front and outside of your shin, working from your ankle up to your knee. And again, the key is to find that right level of pressure that feels both effective and comfortable.
I'm starting to notice a theme here. It seems like a lot of these techniques involve finding those tight spots and applying pressure to release them.
You're catching on. It's about restoring mobility and improving the way your body moves. And speaking of improving movement, let's finally debunk a common myth. Kneecaps don't actually stretch.
Wait, what? I thought stretching your kneecap was a thing, so all those years of trying to pull my kneecap further down my leg were for nothing.
Well, not exactly. While the kneecap itself doesn't stretch, the knee VooDoo technique can help improve the mechanics of your knee joint.
Knee VooDoo. That name is both intriguing and slightly terrifying. Tell me more.
This technique uses a VooDoo Floss Band to target the suprapatellar pouch, which is the area above your kneecap.
Ah, suprapatellar. We've heard that term before.
Yeah.
So this technique is kind of like a sequel to the suprapatellar smash and floss.
You could say that. By compressing and flossing this area, you can help increase knee flexion and address pain and swelling. It's a great way to improve the overall function of your knee joint.
This deep dive has been packed with information, and I'm already starting to see my knee pain in a whole new light. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, though.
Yeah.
What happens next?
You're right, there's still so much more to explore, but before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's time for a little break. When we come back, we'll delve into even more techniques and tie everything together so you can start taking control of your knee health.
All right, we're back and ready to dive into more knee pain solutions. So far, we've mainly focused on the areas around the knee, like the calves and the hamstrings.
Right.
But what about the quads themselves? They feel like they play a pretty big role in how the knee functions.
You're absolutely right. The quads are a major player in knee movement, and this source emphasizes that they shouldn't be neglected when addressing knee pain.
That makes sense. But I have a confession. My quads are always tight, especially after a good leg workout. That's something I should be worried about.
Well, it's certainly something to address. Tight quads can pull on the kneecap, affecting its tracking and potentially leading to pain and discomfort. And it's not just athletes who need to pay attention to their quads. Even if you're mostly sedentary, prolonged sitting can lead to shortened quads, which can contribute to knee issues down the line.
So whether you're a gym rat or a desk jockey, quad mobility is important.
It is. It's crucial.
But how do we go about tackling those tight quads?
This source is all about quad smashing.
Okay.
And just like with the calves and hamstrings, it's not about brute force.
Yes.
It's about applying focused pressure to release tension and restore proper movement.
Okay, so what's the best way to smash your quads? Is it similar to the other techniques that we've discussed?
The principle is the same, but the tools and techniques might vary depending on your, needs and preferences. The source mentions using foam rollers, barbells, and even something called a battle star, which sounds pretty intense.
A battle star. I'm almost afraid to ask, but what is that exactly?
It's essentially a specialized tool designed to apply very targeted pressure to the quads. It might not be for everyone, but for those with stubborn tightness, it can be a game changer. The key with quad smashing, regardless of the tool you choose, is to work against the grain of the muscle fibers, applying slow and steady pressure.
So we're basically ironing out those knots and kinks in the quads.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, perfect.
And the source stresses the importance of clearing a section, meaning you work on a specific area until it no longer feels tender, before moving on to another spot.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to just skim the surface. You want to get deep in those tissues.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about being thorough and patient. And speaking of getting deep into tissues, this source also describes a technique called the Superfriend Quad Smash.
Okay. Superfriend Quad Smash. That name sounds both amazing and slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
What does it involve?
Well, as the name suggests, you'll need a super friend to help you with this one.
Okay.
It involves your friend using the arch of their foot to apply focused pressure along your quad.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense. So it's like a deep tissue massage, but with your friend's foot.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it can be incredibly effective for releasing deep-seated tension in the quads.
Okay.
Of course, communication is key here. You need to make sure you and your friend are on the same page in terms of pressure and comfort levels.
I can only imagine the conversations. Hey, want to come over and smash my quads with your feet? I might need to bribe my friends with pizza for this one.
A little pizza incentive never hurts. But in all seriousness, it's important to find a technique that works for you and your body. Not everyone is comfortable with that level of intensity.
That's a good point. Speaking of finding what works for you, I want to circle back to the suprapatellar smash and floss. We talked about it briefly earlier, but I'm still not entirely clear on what it is or why it's so important.
You're right. We kind of glossed over that one. It's a technique that targets the area just above the kneecap, and it's particularly beneficial if you experience pain from activities like jumping or squats.
So if I feel a nagging ache above my knee after leg day, this is something I should look into.
It could be helpful, especially if you notice your knees caving inward during squats.
Right.
Or if you tend to land jumps with poor form.
Okay.
These movements can put a lot of stress on the area above the kneecap, leading to tightness and discomfort.
Okay. I'm definitely guilty of letting my knees collapse inward during squats.
Yeah.
I always thought it was just a weakness thing, but maybe it's a mobility issue too.
It could be both.
Okay.
And by mobilizing the tissues above the kneecap, you can help improve knee function,
Okay.
reduce pain, and even improve your squat form.
That's encouraging. So the suprapatellar smash and floss is kind of like a tune-up for the area above your kneecap.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, perfect.
You're essentially helping to restore proper movement and reduce stress on the joint. And speaking of restoring movement, we've talked a lot about calf mobilization, but this source also emphasizes the importance of addressing the shins, especially for runners.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier,
Yeah.
but I'm still a little fuzzy on the connection between shin health and knee pain. Can you elaborate on that?
Of course. We've already discussed how tight calves can impact ankle mobility and contribute to knee pain.
Right.
Well, the muscles in your shins also play a role in ankle stability and foot movement. And when those muscles are tight, it can create a chain reaction that affects your entire lower leg, including your knee.
So it's all connected.
It is. Everything's connected.
And this source highlights the importance of mobilizing not just the inside of the shin, but also the front and outside where those peroneal muscles are located.
Exactly. Remember, the peroneal muscles help control ankle stability and foot movement. If they're tight, your ankle can't move properly, and you guessed it, your knee might have to compensate.
It's like a domino effect. One tight muscle can throw everything off.
Good way to put it, yeah.
So how do we address those tight shin muscles?
The source recommends using a foam roller or a lacrosse ball to apply pressure along the length of your shins, working from your ankle up to your knee.
Okay, so foam rolling for the shins, just like we do for the calves and hamstrings. It seems like foam rolling is a pretty versatile tool.
It really is. It's a simple yet effective way to address muscle tightness and improve mobility throughout the body.
Okay.
And while we're on the topic of simple yet effective techniques, let's revisit the knee VooDoo.
Ah, yes. Knee VooDoo. It sounds like something out of a Harry Potter spell book. Remind me what that technique is all about.
Remember, we debunked the myth that you can actually stress your kneecap. The knee VooDoo isn't about stretching. It's about improving the mechanics of your knee joint. It involves using a VooDoo Floss Band to compress and floss the area above your kneecap.
So we're back to the suprapatellar region. And this technique helps to increase knee flexion, reduce pain, and improve the overall function of the joint.
That's the idea. And, you know, one of the things I find so fascinating about this whole deep dive is how it highlights the interconnectedness of the body. We're not just treating the knee in isolation. We're looking at how different areas from the feet to the hips can influence knee health.
You're right. It's like we're putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
Each piece is important, and when they all fit together properly, you get the full picture of how to address knee pain.
Exactly. It's about understanding the root cause of the problem, not just treating the symptoms.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm feeling a lot more hopeful about tackling my knee pain now.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've covered so far.
Sure.
What are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you?
For me, it's the emphasis on a holistic approach. We're not just looking at the knee itself.
Right.
We're considering the entire kinetic chain from the feet to the hips. And we're not just focusing on one technique or modality.
Yeah.
We're exploring a variety of tools and strategies to address muscle tightness, improve mobility, and restore proper function.
I completely agree. It's not about quick fixes or masking the symptoms.
All right.
It's about taking a proactive approach to understanding how your body moves and identifying the underlying causes of your knee pain.
And that leads us to another important takeaway: consistency.
Yes.
These techniques aren't a one-time solution.
No.
They require regular practice and integration into your overall wellness routine.
Absolutely. It's about making mobility a habit, not just something you do when you're in pain.
Yeah.
But we've covered a lot of ground today, and I imagine our listener might need a moment to digest all this information. Where do we go from here?
Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned and then come back for our final segment where we'll tie everything together and leave you with some food for thought.
All right, we're back for the final part of our knee pain deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much already, but I'm eager to see how all of these techniques kind of fit together.
Yeah.
And how I can actually start applying this knowledge to, my own situation.
That's a great point. It's one thing to understand the theory, but it's another thing entirely to put it into practice. So let's try to bridge that gap and empower you to take control of your knee health.
Yeah, that's what I'm most excited about, getting to the actionable stuff.
Right.
So where do we begin? We've covered a lot of ground, from terminal knee extension and gap and smash to calf smashing and the ever so intriguing knee voodoo.
It's quite a toolbox of techniques, isn't it? And as we wrap up, I think it's important to emphasize that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another. And that's why understanding the underlying principles is so crucial.
Okay, so it's not about blindly following a recipe. It's about understanding the why behind each technique.
Yeah.
So I can choose the ones that make sense for my specific needs.
Exactly. It's about becoming an active participant in your own healing process. And as we've discussed throughout this deep dive, a key principle is recognizing the interconnectedness of the body.
Yeah, that's been a recurring theme, how tightness in one area can impact like seemingly unrelated areas. It's like a chain reaction, right?
Precisely. So when we're addressing knee pain, we can't just focus on the knee itself. We need to consider the ankles, the calves, the quads, the hamstrings, even the feet. It's about restoring balance and optimal movement throughout the entire system.
And that's where all these techniques come into play, helping to loosen those tight spots, improve mobility, and ultimately reduce pain and improve function. It's like we're untangling a knot one strand at a time.
I love that analogy. It's about finding those restrictions and gently, patiently working to release them. And one of the things I find so empowering about this approach is that many of these techniques are things you can do yourself at home without any fancy equipment.
That's a huge plus. It makes taking care of my knee health feel much more accessible and manageable.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a learning curve. It's probably not as simple as just rolling around on a foam roller for a few minutes.
You're right. There's definitely a skill to it. It takes time and practice to develop body awareness, to learn how to apply the right amount of pressure and to identify those areas that need attention. But the good news is there are tons of resources available to guide you. There are videos, articles, even online courses that can teach you the proper techniques and help you get the most out of your mobility practice.
Okay, so it's like learning a new language. It takes effort and dedication,
Right.
but once you master the basics, you can start having like meaningful conversations with your body.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more attuned you become to your body signals, and the better equipped you are to address those aches and pains before they become major problems.
So it's not just about fixing the current pain. It's about preventing future pain by making mobility a regular part of my routine.
That's the ultimate goal. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways to ponder.
Okay.
First, remember that knowledge is power.
Okay.
The more you understand about how your body works, the better equipped you are to take care of it.
Okay, knowledge is power. I like that. What else?
Second, Don't be afraid to experiment. Try out the different techniques we've discussed. See what feels good for your body, what makes a difference in your movement, and what helps to alleviate your pain.
So it's about finding what works for me, not about following a rigid protocol.
Exactly. And third, and perhaps most importantly, remember that consistency is key. These techniques aren't magic bullets.
Right.
They work best when practiced regularly, not just when pain flares up.
It's about making mobility a habit, just like brushing your teeth or taking a shower.
I love that analogy. It's about incorporating these practices into your daily life.
Yeah.
So that they become second nature.
This deep dive has truly been an eye-opening experience. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for addressing my knee pain.
Yeah.
And I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic about the future. I used to think knee pain was just something I had to live with. But now I realize that I have the power to change that.
And that's what I hope you take away from this experience, a sense of empowerment and agency. You have the knowledge, the tools, and the ability to take control of your knee health. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are countless resources available to support you, including qualified healthcare professionals who can provide guidance and personalized care.
Well said. I'm feeling inspired and motivated to start putting all of this into practice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for guiding me through this deep dive. I've learned so much.
It's been my pleasure. Remember, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving.
Until next time, happy smashing, happy flossing, and happy knees.